It was a Wednesday night, and dinner in Paris was supposed to be the crowning moment of my career. But when I saw my name crossed off the guest list, a wave of betrayal washed over me. With a shaky finger, I canceled everything, from the expensive wine to the renowned chef. The silence at the table was deafening when I revealed the truth. I know you excluded me to shine brighter. In an act of pure revenge, I replaced her dessert with a disastrous dish that had everyone laughing. The sweet victory of someone who refuses to be trampled. My name is Eloa. Revenge is truly a dish best served cold. The surprised look on my boss, Andre's face, was all I needed to feel that my decision was justified. The joy of my colleagues as they watched the chaos unfold was a testament to how much the dynamics in the company needed to change. After dinner, while laughter echoed around the table, my mind was buzzing with the next steps of my plan. I knew my revenge didn't end there. I needed to use this to my advantage to carve out my space, and for that, I needed strategy. In the following days, I delved deeper into my work, determined to show Andre that I wasn't just an underestimated employee. My dad, Claudio, always told me that perseverance is key. He was a model of strength and love. I remember one afternoon when he took me to the park, and as we walked, he talked about how storms can be intense, but clarity follows afterward. That image never left my mind, and in that moment, I needed that clarity. My mom, Solange, was bravely fighting cancer, and her resilience taught me that life is filled with battles to be faced with courage. There were days when she would sit with me and, with a tired smile, speak about how hope is a light that should never be extinguished. I decided it was time to leverage my knowledge and skills to stand out. I got involved in an ongoing project, a new advertising campaign that promised to change the company's image. Talking to some colleagues, I realized they also had ideas that could make a difference, but they were afraid to share them, fearing Andre's reaction. The energy around me was contagious, and I knew I needed to channel that energy to challenge his authority. One colleague, Raphael, mentioned that he felt the same pressure and frustration of not being heard. That made me realize this fight was collective. We were stronger together. With each meeting where Andre underestimated me, I stored every word, using them as fuel for the fire that burned within me. One day, after a presentation where he had completely ignored my contributions, I decided it was time to act. I went to Andre's office and, instead of staying silent as I always did, laid out my ideas clearly and concisely, arguing about the benefits they would bring to the company. At first, he seemed skeptical, but as I spoke, I noticed some team members nodding in silent agreement. The atmosphere in the room shifted, and with every passing second, I felt closer to claiming my space. However, the feeling of victory was fleeting. Andre wasn't going to stop trying to push me into a corner. He was cunning and always looked for ways to discredit me. A week later, I was called into a meeting where, to my surprise, he announced that he had promoted a colleague who had less experience and skills than I did. I was shocked, but I didn't let disappointment take over. Instead, I talked to my dad about it. Claudio always taught me to turn obstacles into opportunities. He told me to keep fighting and that true strength comes from within, even in times of pain and uncertainty. His words were like a balm, healing the wounds of my self-confidence. With my father's supportive words, I resolved it was time to take bolder steps. I started preparing an alternative proposal for the advertising campaign, with an innovative concept that could not only grab customers' attention, but also show Andre that I was a potential leader. I dedicated long nights to research, collecting data, and creating a visual prototype that would present my vision clearly and impactfully. The smell of fresh coffee I brewed during those late nights mingled with the sound of soft music playing in the background, creating an almost meditative environment that allowed me to focus. Finally, the day of the presentation arrived. Nerves swept over me as I waited for Andre to arrive in the meeting room. I knew that if I wanted him to pay attention, I needed to be convincing. The room was full, and the murmur of conversations hushed when he walked in. Seeing him, I took a deep breath and, with the confidence I had cultivated, began to present my idea. I spoke about market trends, consumer needs, and how our campaign could stand out. The silence in the room was palpable. Every gaze was fixed on me, and I felt like I was finally commanding the attention I deserved. When I finished, I noticed a change in Andre's expression. He wasn't smiling, but the look of disdain had turned into thoughtful consideration. The feedback wasn't immediate, but the appreciative words from my colleagues lifted my spirits. That team was starting to unite, and I could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. After that meeting, I realized my struggle was not just about defeating Andre. It was also about finding my place in this competitive world. With every small advance, I felt like I was not only rebuilding my career, but also reshaping the image I had of myself. My relationship with my mom and dad grew even stronger, as they were my pillars of support. Conversations with Solange about her battle against cancer were always deep, and I found myself thinking about how her strength inspired me to face my own challenges. She always said that even in the darkest moments, it's possible to find a reason to smile. As time passed, I realized that the revenge I initially sought wasn't what I truly wanted. The respect I wanted to earn was a product of my effort, not an impulsive act of rebellion. The real victory was revealing itself in the confidence I was building within myself. I knew I was just beginning this journey of self-discovery and overcoming. I decided I would no longer let Andre's actions dictate my path. I would focus on myself and what I could achieve. After all, life is a series of challenges, and I was ready to face them head-on. Each day, the strength that came from my parents, from their struggles and victories, became an intrinsic part of me. And so, I knew that regardless of what happened, I had a solid foundation upon which to build my future. As I reflected on what had transpired, I realized that my determination needed to be more than just a response to Andre's contempt. I needed a solid plan. Something that would not only help me stand out, but also show how capable I truly was. The dinner in Paris could be an important event for the team, but I was determined to prove that my work and dedication could speak for themselves, even without his validation. The idea of an audacious project began to take shape in my mind. I knew the company was planning a new marketing campaign, something that could take months to develop. But what if I could get ahead of that? What if I could present an innovative proposal before anyone else? This could be my path to the respect I so desperately craved. To bring this idea to life, I needed to gather people who genuinely cared, those who could help me shape this vision. That night, I went to Claudio and Solange's house, seeking a safe space where I could share my thoughts. As soon as I walked in, the aroma of home-cooked dinner enveloped me, and I found my mother resting on the sofa, surrounded by cushions. Claudio was in the kitchen, stirring the spices he knew so well. The warmth of home was comforting, and I needed that. "Hi, dear. How was your day?" Claudio asked, always with that warm smile that lit up any room. I took a deep breath and began to recount my frustration with Andre, talking about the dinner exclusion and how it affected me. Solange listened intently, her eyes full of empathy. When I finished, she sat up straight, her eyes shining with the strength that always characterized her. "You are more than he realizes, Eloa. Don't let anyone's opinion define your worth," she said, her words resonating in my mind. "You have the ability to turn this situation into an opportunity. Use it to your advantage." My mother's words were a balm for my soul. I needed to channel that energy and strength into something positive. That night, we talked about the project I had in mind, and to my surprise, the idea began to evolve. Claudio brought out some old notes he had on marketing campaigns, and together we began to sketch out some ideas. Solange, even while facing her struggles, offered valuable suggestions on how to approach the target audience in a more humanized way. The following days became a whirlwind of hard work and creativity. I would wake up early and spend hours in the office, researching and putting together my proposal. Sometimes the fatigue was overwhelming, but the chance to finally be heard gave me a new lease on life. Moreover, I reconnected with some colleagues who had always been respectful and had innovative visions. They were excited to collaborate, and together, we began to shape something that could truly make an impact. However, as the project took shape, my mother's health became a challenge. She always seemed strong and determined, but I could see that the little things were affecting her more than she let on. One particularly difficult day, I found Solange sitting in the garden, looking at the wilting flowers. The scene tugged at my heart, and I realized that, like those flowers, she also needed care and love. "Let's take a walk, Mom," I suggested, gently pulling her up. She hesitated, but I eventually convinced her. Walking under the sun seemed to do us both good, and as we strolled, we talked about my ambitions and how I was preparing to present my idea. Solange smiled, full of pride, and that gave me even more motivation. Each step we took together reminded me of what truly mattered. The love and support I received from my parents were what made my battle easier to face. That connection drove me to continue, not just for myself, but for them too. When I returned to work, the energy I brought with me was palpable. I wasn't just fighting against Andre, I was fighting for a future that valued all the sacrifices my family made for me. Finally, the big day of the presentation arrived. I was nervous, but at the same time, confident. I had prepared for every question, every objection that could arise. The anxiety heightened as I entered the meeting room and saw Andre with his skeptical and critical demeanor. He was there, ready to underestimate me once again, but I wouldn't let that happen. As I began to present my proposal, I saw familiar faces among my colleagues, all attentive and encouraging. With every slide I passed, I felt more secure. The presentation flowed, and I realized I was finally showing my true worth. When I finished, a momentary silence filled the room, and it was in that instant that I knew I had captured the attention I had long desired. Andre, visibly surprised, was the first to break the silence, and his words were not dismissive, but rather inquisitive and curious. The warmth in the room grew, and I realized that the internal battle I faced was not just mine, but one shared by all who had felt invisible at some point. The fight was just beginning, and the feeling that victory was closer filled me with hope. Now I had a new focus. Revenge could be sweet, but fulfilling a dream was even sweeter. After all, what really mattered was how I dealt with adversities and the love I carried with me. It was time to show the world, and especially myself, that I was stronger than I had ever imagined. If you resonate with this journey, don't forget to subscribe and follow the next steps of this transformation. The decision to act was like a wave that formed within me, growing and becoming impossible to ignore. From the moment I received the news of my exclusion from the dinner in Paris, a deep indignation filled my mind. I wondered why, after all my effort, Andre still saw me as just an intern lost in a sea of professionals. The idea of canceling the event became a reflection of what I desired, a cry for freedom and the need to show that I was more than he thought. I thought of my mother, Solange, bravely battling illness, and my dad, Claudio, who offered unwavering support. They always believed in me, and that faith pushed me not to give up. The first part of my plan was to connect with colleagues who, like me, felt underestimated. Together, we formed a group that would become the backbone of my strategy. Each day, instead of letting the pressure and Andre's criticism bring me down, I sought strength in the conversations I had with those people. They shared their frustrations and dreams, and that's when I realized I wasn't alone in this fight. In fact, there were many of us yearning for recognition and respect. The unity of this group was what I needed to boost my confidence and carve a different path. As the days went by, I committed myself to understand more about the decisions being made in our team. When Andre organized a meeting to discuss an important project, I felt that it was the perfect opportunity to showcase my value. With the help of my colleagues, I prepared a presentation that highlighted points he had overlooked. I spent sleepless nights researching, creating graphs, and rehearsing my pitch. I knew that if everything went well, I could finally make my mark. When the day of the meeting arrived, nerves were running high, but determination spoke louder. Among the attentive gazes of my colleagues, I delivered my presentation with passion, emphasizing the importance of the ideas we had collectively discussed. André, surprised and clearly annoyed, tried to undermine my effort, but the people around me showed their support. What I didn't expect was that the positive reaction from the group would resonate not just in the meeting room, but also in the company's corridors. Conversations about my performance began to spread, and messages of support reached me. I discovered that the strength of our collective work was undeniable, and the seed I had planted was starting to bloom. The following days were intense. I felt more confident, but at the same time, I worried about my mother's health. Solange was undergoing another round of treatment, and each visit to the hospital reminded me of the fragility of life. During those difficult hours, my dad's affection comforted me. Claudio always knew what to say to give me strength. He would sit beside me, holding my hand and talking about how I was a warrior. His words resonated in my heart, reminding me that no matter what happened at work, I had something much greater to fight for. At home, in the quiet of my room, I reflected on the journey I was charting. Revenge seemed less important compared to the support I was receiving. Solange's strength in her daily battles illuminated my own journey. I realized that true victory wasn't about bringing André down, but about getting up and fighting for what I believed in. The connection with my colleagues was an indication that together we were stronger and could change the company's dynamics. Meanwhile, a new project was about to be launched, and the launch would include executives from various parts of the world. André, of course, was eager to showcase his control, but I was sure that an opportunity to shine was approaching. My idea was to create an innovative proposal that would not only attract attention, but also present a new way of viewing things. With the group's support, I developed a bold and audacious proposal that could be the answer to everything I had faced. When the day of the presentation arrived, the tension in the air was palpable. High-level executives were in the room, ready to hear what André had to say. I mentally prepared myself, taking deep breaths and recalling every encouraging word Claudio and Solange had given me. When I finally got the chance to speak, I held my head high and began presenting my proposal. The excitement was visible, and the energy in the room felt different. The enthusiasm I felt spread through the room, and for the first time, I realized I was there to stay. The applause that followed was more than recognition. It was validation of all the hard work, sleepless nights, and struggles I had faced. At the end of the presentation, André's look was a mix of surprise and disdain, but I didn't care anymore. What mattered was that, alongside my colleagues, I had built something greater than myself. And even though the battle against adversities was far from over, I was increasingly convinced that true power lay in standing together, seeking support, and fighting for our dreams. By that point, revenge had transformed into a reflection of growth and overcoming, and I was just beginning to understand what that truly meant. As the days passed, I realized that the battle I was fighting wasn't just against André, but also against myself. Each meeting where I remained on the sidelines, each disdainful comment I heard, fueled an anger that shadowed me. Yet, this shadow began to transform into something different. It became a force that drove me to seek solutions and prepare for the next stage of my life. At home, the atmosphere was heavy, but there were moments when my mother encouraged me to keep going, even when pain made her more fragile. Solange, despite her challenges, maintained an admirable fighting spirit. One night, while we were on the sofa watching a movie, she looked at me and said, "Eloa, never let anyone dim your light. You have a shine that is uniquely yours." Those words reverberated within me, igniting a flame I thought was extinguished. I decided that if André didn't see me as a valuable part of the team, I would need to stand out in another way. I began working on a personal project, something that reflected my skills and passions. With the help of a group of colleagues who believed in me, I started developing a presentation that showcased a new concept in digital marketing, something that could revolutionize the way the company connected with its customers. It was a bold idea, but I felt I was on the right track. The passion for what I was creating energized me, and for a few moments, I forgot about the pressure I felt because of Andre. The morning I decided to present my project to the team, a mix of anxiety and excitement washed over me. I knew that Andre probably wouldn't be happy to see my initiative, but I had to take the risk. As I entered the meeting room, I noticed the curious gazes of my colleagues and felt a chill in my stomach. The room was silent as I began to speak. I described my vision passionately, using graphs and data to emphasize the importance of innovation. As the presentation progressed, I saw some faces light up with enthusiasm for my ideas. The greatest relief, however, came at the end when I saw Andre silent, struggling to find words to undermine my effort. As soon as I finished, a colleague stood up and congratulated me for my courage and creativity. Others followed suit, and for a brief moment, I felt the respect I had always sought was finally materializing. Andre, however, didn't hesitate to critique, trying to undermine what I had presented. But instead of letting it shake me, I stood firm, ready to respond. Andre, I understand your point, but I believe that innovation is what sets us apart in such a competitive market. We need to adapt, or we'll be left behind. The atmosphere in the room changed. People began murmuring in approval. I felt like I was not just shedding the doubt that haunted me, but also the notion that I couldn't be a leader. After the meeting, I went home with a weight lifted off my shoulders. I found Solange in the garden, tending to some flowers that were beginning to wilt. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. "How did it go?" she asked, her eyes sparkling. I sat down beside her and shared every detail. As I spoke, I saw her expression shift from concern to pride. "You have a gift, my daughter. Never forget that. What matters is that you believed in yourself," she said, wrapping me in a tight embrace. It was as if all the negative energy I had accumulated dissipated in that moment. I was starting to understand that my fight wasn't just for a place in the company, but also for internal recognition, the validation that I was capable. The following weeks brought new challenges, but I was more prepared. The confidence I began to build helped me deal with Andre, who, although still difficult, seemed a bit more cautious in his approaches. I continued working on my project, and with the support of colleagues, I managed to turn the idea into a formal proposal to be presented to the board. Each step taken reflected the growth I was experiencing, and I wished my mother could see the strong woman I was becoming. However, life had its own plans, and one day I received a call from the hospital. Solange had taken a turn for the worse and needed to be admitted. The news hit me like a blow. The pain I felt was intense, but I knew I needed to be strong. When I arrived at the hospital and saw her lying in bed, connected to machines, my heart shattered. She looked at me and, with a faint smile, said, "I'm here, my love, don't worry. You are a warrior and I'm so proud of you." Her words penetrated me, echoing the strength she had always shown. In that moment, I realized that my struggle at work and my mother's battle against illness were intertwined in a way I had never perceived before. Deep down, I needed to be her voice, just as she had always been mine. The pain I felt witnessing her fragility propelled me to fight even harder for my dreams, not just for myself, but for her. And I was determined to show Andre that I was more than he thought, that I was capable of great things even in the face of adversity. The determination grew within me like a flame that could not be extinguished. With my dad Claudio's support, who always believed in me, and my mother Solange's silent strength, I was ready to step forward. The next day was marked by a team meeting where Andre announced a new strategy for the project I had worked so hard on. He spoke enthusiastically, but the absence of my name in his considerations cut like a knife. My ideas, which had seemed promising before, were being brushed aside while I watched from the sidelines, feeling anger and frustration build up. On the way home, Claudio's words echoed in my mind. He always said that true power lies in the ability to reinvent oneself in the face of adversity. It was at that moment that I realized revenge could be more than just an act of retribution. Instead of simply seeking ways to retaliate against Andre, I could use the situation to my advantage, turning pain into motivation. My mind began to devise a plan, a strategy to stand out. I was determined to create a presentation that captured not only the ideas I had developed, but also the essence of what I believed to be innovative leadership. In the days that followed, I immersed myself in research, preparing for the upcoming meeting. I knew that the next presentation would be the chance I needed to reverse the narrative. Meanwhile, Solange bravely fought against the effects of chemotherapy. Each passing day, she showed more strength than I could have imagined, facing challenges with a resilience that inspired me. Each smile she gave me felt like a wave of courage flowing within me. The sleepless nights I spent studying and revising my presentation were worth it for the idea that this was all for her. The night before the meeting, I sat beside my mother, listening to her stories and advice on how to handle difficult situations. Solange always had a clear view of life, and her words helped me find clarity amid chaos. With her by my side, I began to see that my struggle wasn't just against Andre, but for something much bigger, the validation of my efforts and the freedom to be who I truly was. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would not only present my ideas, but do so in a way that reflected my true essence and the strength I inherited from my mother. When the day of the meeting arrived, my heart raced, but I maintained my composure. As I entered the room, I saw Andre sitting at the head of the table, his authoritative expression as always. The team members looked at me with a mix of curiosity and indifference. I knew I needed to change that perception. As I began to present, I was overwhelmed by a wave of confidence. Each slide of my presentation was more than just a graph. It was a representation of my effort and sleepless nights. I spoke with passion, citing not only data and analyses, but also the future vision I believed our team should follow. Andre tried to interrupt, but I wouldn't allow it. With every attempt he made to undermine me, I doubled my energy, showing that my voice was valid and necessary. The culminating moment came when, at the end of the presentation, I asked the team for their opinions and suggestions. What happened next was something I never expected. Instead of silencing me, my colleagues began to support my ideas. One by one, they started to voice their agreement, recognizing the need for a change in the approach that Andre advocated. I saw the expressions of surprise on his face as his authority wavered. As the discussion unfolded, I felt a mix of adrenaline and joy. It was as if I were reclaiming not just my space in the team, but also the self-esteem Andre had tried to rob from me. After the meeting, some colleagues approached me to congratulate me on the presentation, and for the first time, I felt genuine recognition from them. This experience was a turning point for me. I had not only overcome the exclusion Andre had imposed on me, but had also shown myself that I was capable of fighting and winning. When I returned home, my mind buzzing with thoughts and my heart light, I found Solange waiting for me. As I recounted the meeting to her, I saw her eyes shine with pride. It was a special moment that made me realize that regardless of the final outcome, my journey was becoming transformative. The love and strength of my family were the true weapons I needed. I felt that my mother's fight against cancer taught me to face challenges with bravery and perseverance. Now, with a new purpose and renewed confidence, I decided I wouldn't let Andre underestimate me again. I had a dream greater than revenge. It was about being recognized and, more importantly, about being true to myself. Before I went to sleep, I wrote in my journal, "True victory isn't about defeating others, but about finding the strength within to shine in the darkness." If you've ever faced tough moments and found a way to overcome them, share your story. Together, we can inspire and empower each other. The next morning, the soft light of the sun streamed through my bedroom window, and I felt a wave of determination wash over me. The decision to cancel my boss's dinner in Paris wasn't just an act of rebellion. It was a cry for freedom I needed to let out. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman ready to fight for herself. The pride and courage of my dad, Claudio, echoed in my mind, while the words of my mom, Solange, always resonated strongly. Even amid her battle with cancer, she never let difficulties define her. I wanted to have that same strength. As I got ready, I couldn't help but let thoughts of Andre torment me. He always saw me as just an assistant, someone who didn't have what it took to climb the corporate ladder. In fact, his underestimation of me bothered me deeply. I knew I was more than that, and I was determined to prove it not only to him, but to myself. My plan began to form in my mind, but I didn't want it to be a hollow revenge. I wanted it to be a statement of my competence. The day felt endless at the office. With each passing meeting, each disdainful glance from Andre, my determination grew. I decided it was time to show that I had valuable ideas and that my contribution could make a difference. I immersed myself in a project that had been overlooked, one that could be the key to a significant breakthrough for the company. I spent hours researching, analyzing data, and crafting a presentation that could impress. As the afternoon approached, I felt my heart race. It was the moment of truth. I invited Andre for a chat, and even with nerves bubbling inside me, I maintained a firm posture. Deep down, I wanted to show him that I wasn't the invisible assistant he always believed me to be. In the meeting room, I tried not to let anxiety take over. I began to lay out my ideas, highlighting how they could benefit the team and ultimately the company. As I spoke, I saw a change in Andre's expression. Although he tried to maintain his indifferent demeanor, a trace of curiosity flickered in his eyes. I described the points I had found and how I planned to implement them, while noticing my colleagues' faces lighting up in agreement. The feedback was positive, and for the first time, I began to feel that I could have a real impact. When I finished, Andre had no choice but to acknowledge my effort, albeit reluctantly. He mumbled a few words of praise, and while they weren't enough, they were a small step in the right direction. I left the meeting with a mix of emotions. I felt proud of what I had done, but at the same time, the fight was far from over. Andre was still my boss, and his view of me wouldn't change overnight. That night, I returned home exhausted but satisfied. Claudio was in the living room watching a movie, and his presence was the comfort I needed. He noticed my expression and asked what had happened. I told him about the meeting and how I finally got to share my ideas. The look of pride on his face made it all worthwhile. "I'm so proud of you, Eloa. You have everything you need to shine. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise," he said, and I smiled, feeling a wave of love and support. The following days were an emotional roller coaster. Andre started including me a bit more in decisions, but resistance was still present. His power was palpable, and there were moments when I wondered if I could really break through that barrier. However, my mother's strength always inspired me. Even in the midst of her struggles, she never gave up. This idea of resilience became a mantra for me. Soon, I realized that the battle wasn't just against Andre, but against my own insecurities. With every small advancement I made, I felt like I was breaking the chains that held me back. The support from Claudio and Solange reminded me that I wasn't alone. Life was challenging me, and I was willing to face every obstacle with my head held high. One night, while reviewing my strategic plan, I received a message from Andre asking me to join him and some executives to discuss the future of the project. My heart raced. It was a unique opportunity, and I knew I needed to prepare. I spent hours honing my skills, searching for information that could impress them and help me defend my point of view. The day of the meeting finally arrived, and as I entered the room, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. All eyes were on me, and I knew it was my chance to shine. As I presented, I realized I was not just fighting for a position, but for everyone who had believed in me. Claudio's gaze and Solange's indomitable spirit propelled me to give my best. In the end, the meeting was a success. I was praised for my contribution, and André had no choice but to acknowledge my importance to the team. Although there was still a long way to go, I felt I had taken a significant step toward my freedom. Life wasn't easy, but I was learning to turn each challenge into an opportunity for growth. With love and support, I realized I had the power to be the protagonist of my own story.